Hey, it's your gay sports fanatic here for another installment. This week we're looking at college football. Looking forward to college football week 3. Buckle your seatbelt as the ride's getting bumpy. It's going to get bumpier. So, what we're going to do in today's installment is we're going to take a look back at my predictions that I made in week 2, see how the gay sports fanatic fared. And then we're also going to look at the tops and the bottoms after week 2. We're also going to then, I'm going to do a little commentary, brief commentary at the end on Coach Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. So without further ado, let's dive in here. So, okay, how did I do last week? Let's start off with the first pick I made, which was Duke on Friday night at Northwestern. Duke was a 2.5 point underdog. I took Duke to win, and they did. So that is a W. Next, I took Penn State on Saturday to cover. They were giving away 30 to Bowling Green. They didn't cover, so that's an L. Then I said that if Texas drops to a 6.5 point favorite against Michigan, take them, and it did. And Texas, of course, covered that, so that's a W. And then Iowa State at Iowa. Iowa State was a 2.5 point underdog when I recorded. They went to a -3 underdog at kickoff. I said it didn't matter. I took Iowa State to win the game, and they did. So that's a W. Then I took Northern Illinois in the Northern Illinois and Notre Dame game. I took Notre Dame to cover the 28-point spread. I don't think I need to tell you much about that. That was a loss. Then we had Colorado at Nebraska. I said Nebraska would win. I didn't like the spread. It was 7.5. So I punted on the spread. I got the win right. So we'll just call that a wash there. Then I took Tennessee, who was giving away 8 to North Carolina State. And Tennessee covered that 8 point spread. So that's a win. And then then the Houston was at Oklahoma. I took Oklahoma to cover the 21.5 point spread. They didn't do it. So that's a loss. So bottom line, I finished 4-3 against the spread last week in college football week 2. So let's look at our tops and our bottoms after we go into week 3. So top, Texas. What can I say? I don't like them at all, but hey, Texas went into Ann Arbor, the big house. That score does not indicate this game at all. Texas dominated from the opening snap. It was total domination. Also, top up for me is Nebraska. And they took care of business against Colorado, and they really look good. So hey, maybe Nebraska after 25 years is going to maybe show up and do something. So I don't know, but they looked as good as they could. So Nebraska up, USC up 2-0. This is a team that's surprising me a little bit so far. So let's give them a top. How about the SEC? 6 of the top 7 AP ranked teams are from the SEC. That has never happened before. But this will not last long because all hell's going to break loose because these teams are going to start playing each other. So, just get out of town here. It's going to be an absolute mess. But for a week, enjoy it if you're an SEC fan. So, also up, I want to go to Tennessee here. Tennessee, kind of like Nebraska, could be somebody that's kind of hiding in the back in the woods a little bit. So Tennessee, let's go with them as a top here again this week. So okay, let's look at our bottoms. Okay, you can't. Last week Notre Dame was a top. This week I have them in the bottoms. Okay, that shows you how quickly life can change. So Notre Dame now is my big bottom feeder this week. Okay, after that putrid performance, particularly on offense against Northern Illinois, down. Next for me is Colorado, down. I don't know about anybody else. I'm getting tired of the sizzle, the glamour, the ads, the constant hysteria. When is this team going to do something on the field? So, bottom. Also for me is Alabama. I hate to throw Alabama in here because they could very easily be a top next week, but they just haven't looked that great to me. So it just didn't look good. So I'm going with Alabama at the bottom. Probably won't hear that very often. So that wraps up our week 2. We head into week 3, and I will tell you that this week 3 schedule is probably the weakest or the least marquee good games of any week of this year. So if there's any week you're going to take off college football, this might be the one to do it. So there's not that many great games here. But let me go with some of the picks I have here. I have Boston College, which is at Missouri. Missouri is giving away 16 and a half at home. So Boston College is pretty heavy underdog here, but I'm still going to grab the Tigers. I'm taking Missouri, and I'm giving away the 16 and a half. We have number nine Oregon. I don't know if they're number nine or not, but at Oregon State, and Oregon State's getting 16 and a half. Now, let me tell you about this one right here, okay? This is something called revenge because Oregon bailed, ditched Oregon State to leave them in the trash bin of history when them and, the other teams bolted for the Big Ten, and Oregon State, Washington State were just left out to fend for themselves. This is a big rivalry anyway. I'm going to take Oregon State and I'm going to take the points. It's Oregon State plus 16 and a half. I'm grabbing Oregon State. Next is Notre Dame, which is still 18th at Duke. And Duke is getting 10 and a half. So Notre Dame's a 10 and a half point favorite. You wouldn't think after last week I'd do this, but I'm taking Notre Dame to cover this 10 and a half point spread against Duke. Next up is Indiana at UCLA. UCLA is getting 3 points. This is going to be one of our classic Big Ten craziness, where a team from the Midwest has to travel all the way out to the West Coast to Los Angeles and play. So that's what we're getting here. I'm taking UCLA. I'll take them plus 3 over Indiana. Next is our aforementioned Colorado. I'm going to actually make some steak this week, okay? Actually produce something. So I think Colorado, who is a 7.5 point favorite over at Colorado State. I'm going to grab Colorado here. I'm going to say this is going to be the first game, the third game. This will be the first game where I think Colorado actually performs and does something. So I'm going to take Colorado. I'm going to give away the 7.5. Next up, we're going to move over to UNLV at Kansas. I kind of like this Kansas team. They are giving away 7. I like Kansas to cover this spread. So Kansas minus 7. Kansas is a 7 point favorite. Take Kansas and give away the points. Next up, we have Florida State, who is a 6.5 point underdog at Memphis. Florida State is a team that I think is going to get their act together this week, a little bit like Colorado, although Florida State's look much worse than Colorado. Florida State, I think, has got to be pretty ticked off. So I'm going to take them to cover this spread at Memphis. So they're giving away 6.5 at this point. I'm going to take them to cover that. So I'm sticking quite a bit here again with taking taking the favorites to cover. So it seems to be a lot of that here, but anyway, it is what it is. So that's week 3 for you. Kind of, like I said, kind of a mediocre week. So I want to talk a little bit now, real quick, about Notre Dame and Coach Marcus Freeman. Now, there's been a lot of talk, I think all emotionally fueled, about firing Coach Freeman after this debacle against Northern Illinois. And I admit it's a debacle. It was embarrassing, particularly on offense. Some of the calls on offense, I'm like, who's calling these plays? They look good on defense, though. By the way, Northern Illinois is a veteran team. They're not a bad team. I know, you hear Northern Illinois and you think, but still, no excuse. Notre Dame, with their recruiting, et cetera, they should have won this game going away, which they did not. So this calling for the firing of Marcus Freeman, I'm going to take us on a little historical ride here. If you know Notre Dame football in the past, let's go back to the 80s, time travel here. They hired this guy named Jerry Faust. He's a high school football coach, I think in Ohio somewhere. And they made him the head coach at Notre Dame. And it was a complete disaster. So for 5 years, they honored his contract. Notre Dame was bad to mediocre the whole time, just awful. So that's not what Coach Freeman is. I mean, they've won a couple bowls with Coach Freeman. They've won some big games for them. Yes, they've lost. Like I think Stanford was one. Obviously, last week was one. They've lost some games they just shouldn't have. But I think some of this jumping on him to get out of town is quite premature and very much emotion based, because I'll tell you what, I still don't count out Notre Dame at all from being in the playoff, the college football playoff. I'll tell you why. They're 18th ranked now. They play, really, in my opinion, no one until USC in the Coliseum. Now, again, if they play like they did last week, then just about anybody could beat them, I guess. But I don't think that's going to continue. I think we may be talking about Notre Dame here 2 months from now, having reeled off an 8-game win streak. They could easily do that. Look at their schedule. Just look at this schedule. Then they go to the Coliseum, and that will be the big game. They win that, they're in the playoff. Again, though, if I come back here in the future and they've dropped some game they shouldn't have, then you know we'll we'll do a different approach. But right now, I think it's just way too premature. So, Coach Freeman, stay, win, and I'm not even a Notre Dame fan, but win, as I think you will, into the game against USC. So, you guys, please comment, like, subscribe, but I'd love your comments to tell me what you think. If you think I'm full of crap, if you love me, either way, I will certainly respond to some of the comments. But yeah, be sure to also subscribe, of course, so you can get all of my content. I'll have my NFL segment coming up here very soon. I did very well with the NFL picks. Gay Sports Fanatic did very well with its NFL picks last week. So thank you, you guys. Over and out. We'll see you soon. Appreciate it.